Chapter 4 will look at a table of drugs related to hypothalamic and pituitary hormones. Or if you want, it's going to give you an idea of the analogs of some of the hypothalamic and pituitary hormones and very quickly their use. First, imagine you had someone with pituitary dwarfism. Well, you know they don't make GH. Can I give GH? Not really. GH is a big peptide. It's always tough to give proteins. They're tough to solubilize in a solution that could be given IV, and if you take them orally, you digest them. So we use analogs, and the analogs of GH are called somatrem or somatropin. You see soma for growth, for body. Well, it could be used in pituitary dwarfism. It's also been used for osteoporosis. And let's not forget there's also an unlabeled use out there without any scientific backup that it prevents aging. I'm always worried about this because people who take growth hormone derivatives, let's not forget that growth is also often synonymous with precursor lesions of cancers. So I'm not too sure what it means to take growth hormone to prevent aging. You know, there's a big one for your exam. Maybe not somatrem or somatropin, but one that I know is often board tested is octreotide, the somatostatin analog we reviewed already that is used in carcinoid disease, the one that will decrease production of serotonin. Could be used for other secretory GI tumors. It is also used in acromegaly. It's used in acromegaly because it can decrease GH secretion. In effect, if you remember endocrine phys, somatostatin is a peptide that tends to cause inhibition of release of many other hormones. For ACTH, or it's a little bit like the GH analog, you may want to know the name. Cosintropin is the actual ACTH analog that is used. It's actually only the first 20 or so amino acid of the whole protein to make it more soluble. It is sometimes used in infantile spasms. Infantile spasms seem to have an etiology possibly associated with hypoglycemia. And if you give ACTH and increase cortisol, you would stimulate gluconeogenesis, have enough glucose not to have that neurological dysfunction, neuromuscular dysfunction. As far as GnRH analog, well, this is like octreotide. That's one you must know well on the exam. GnRH analog, they're used in depot form. It should not say respiratory form. I don't think we do breathe the GnRH analog. It should have said repository form. So if you want, if it's too big to write for some people, let's put it as depot form. That might be better. And GnRH analog is the drug leuprolide or nafarelin. As a GnRH analog, it's very important in advanced prostate cancer. Now, it is also used in endometriosis, and it could be used in hypogonadal state, but there's a big difference. If you want to use it for hypogonadism, you must use it in pulsatile fashion, so that then you can trigger FSH-LH stimulation, rather than continuous depot forms that would be associated with constant production and therefore negative feedback on the whole axis. Talking about hypogonadal states, if you want to use FSH and LH, they're actually called FSH and LH, and they're used purely for that. There's another one to know well. If I want to use prolactin inhibiting hormone or factor, well, it's dopamine. I can't use dopamine. It would have too short of a half-life, and it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So I use dopamine agonist. Do you remember the drug bromocriptine or the drug pergolide, which can be used in hyperprolactinemia, the most common pituitary adenoma? Well, as such, that's often a board question. Let's not forget the side effects here. Dyskinesias, because it's a dopamine agonist, it'll mimic in a way the dyskinesias of Huntington's. You'll become hyperkinetic. Let's not forget also the issues of nausea, vomiting that would occur at the same time, and potential for psychosis. Oxytocin is called oxytocin. It's used for the same thing it's used in our own body, labor induction. And your last one is the one that is also important. Vasopressin analog is desmopressin. And desmopressin is used in the management of neurogenic diabetes insipidus. That is when ADH is not being produced. Other uses have been in hemophilia A and von Willebrand disease. That is using the vasopressin analog as a drug that will now cause enhanced release from the endothelium of VWF. VWF acts as a depot form, as we know in pathology, of factor VIII. which therefore can cause a release of both VWF and 8 in deficiencies of these factors. This can only work if those factors were already made but kept in what are known as Weibull-Palade bodies. Well, I'll let you discover this when you review your pathology, hoping that the pathologist will then make the link with the pharmacology for you. Finally, desmopressin is also used in primary nocturnal enuresis. After all, it is antidiuretic hormone, is it not? This concludes Chapter 4 on drugs related to hypothalamic and pituitary hormones.